Hello and welcome back to RageGamingVideos, Elden Ring and a new tier list video. As we continue our path through 1.08, I was asking what other topics would you guys like me to have a look at, and categories of weapons is something that came up. The first category of weapon I thought of was obviously Greatsword here, because we actually have not only a bunch of options, but a bunch of really good options as a weapon category. Seemed like a fun starting point, so we have our tier list with a bunch of the ones that I consider the best of all of your Greatsword options. We're also including some curved Greatswords as well. As always, we have S, A, B, and C, and as a reminder, these are, in my opinion, some of the best options you have for Greatswords. With that said, we're going to work our way from the bottom up, and we're going to start with C tier, the Inseparable Sword. It's an awkward one. Despite the incredibly cool design, the lore ties of the weapon itself, and the really cool mechanics, this is outclassed by a weapon that does the same thing in the same category of weapon. On paper, it's still great, like a weapon with a unique moveset, it's more vertical, and feels quicker because of that, in fact. A weapon that deals good holy damage, which can be buffed up to be even more effective with its Ash of War, perfect for killing those that live in death, and having a ranged option as that. It should be a good weapon, and one that I would consider maybe B tier at least, based on its performance, and yet we've got it as a C. That is because there's literally a weapon with the same mechanics and moveset, another sword that can be made to work in the same way, and yet has better output and more freedom of choice. So with the existence of the Banished Knight's Greatsword, this has to be a tier below that, in C. Also down in C is the Zamor Curved Sword. In PvE, this weapon has a fun spinning moveset that works best in two-hand because when you power stance it, you lose the unique moveset for some reason. Anyway, the Ash of War works great. Zamor Ice Storm is a burst of frost buildup around your location, which works great in unison with something like Fire's Deadly Sin Incantation, meaning it deals ticks of fire damage over time, things that are near you. That removes the frost buildup so that you can get another frost proc going. This means you'll be popping frost bursts pretty regularly while making use of this cool and unique spinning style of attack. In PvP, that can work as an incredible defensive AoE, great in tight areas during, say, an invasion, but it's a bit of a niche case where it works well. Mostly in PvP, you'll be needing to catch people in trade scenarios, which means it can work, but it is a bit awkward to be, consistent. Overall, the weapon has some power in specific scenarios, but it does require other things to make it work well, rather than it being strong on its own. Still, it deserves an acknowledgement, and that's why it's here. Last up for the C tier here is the Sword of Milos. This gnarly looking sword is a very cool one. It has its 6 extra mechanics on top of just being a unique weapon visually. It's an important weapon thanks to its passives though, like restoring FP when something dies near you, let alone you having had killed it. It doesn't need to be you dealing the damage. As long as something dies, you get FP back. That'll even work if it's on your back, like you're not actively holding and using it, it's just technically equipped, it'll still work. And it has a unique charged heavy where you drag the weapon forward and then uppercut swing in a very cool way. That's useful in general content because it's a mini gap closer and unexpectedly so in PvP. The Shriek of Milos, the Ash of War, is an AoE effect. This staggers enemies when you use it, it debuffs them to make them take more damage, it causes more status build up on the target, and the roar is a war cry, so you get a bit of AR for that, and you get a new heavy attack moveset like other war cries. It's never going to hit overly hard or make a major impact on its own, it just works really well in combinations with other weapons and other builds as the sort of toolkit in that. A power stance setup with say 2 greatswords is a good way to use this weapon, benefiting from its unique abilities, movesets and otherwise, but relying on it as a second weapon more than a thing on its own, where there is going to be stronger greatswords to use. Moving up to the B tier then, we have that weapon I was speaking of, the Banished Knight's Greatsword. Combining this with the Sacred Blade Ash of War, and you've got yourself a make your own inseparable sword, except better. As I mentioned, this is the weapon that essentially is the same greatsword with the same moveset, but with a less interesting design. Same mechanics though, combined with that Sacred Blade Ash. So it's the same thing but with more freedom, better scaling options, and allowing you to swap away from holy damage where it's weak in your, say, PvE scenario. There isn't much more to say about it. It's just the better version of the Inseparable Sword, which is really lame because the Inseparable Sword is such a cooler weapon in design and lore, and it should be the better option. I wonder if we'll ever see like a balance change for that or anything. Then we have the Death's Poker. I've done various builds with this, and I think it's one of the coolest weapons in the game in terms of the Ash of War effect. As a greatsword, it's hideous, but mechanically, like I say, really good. A standard greatsword moveset combined with a 3-part Ash of War. Use it and you'll pop a mini explosion. Use it and do a light attack and you'll send out some icy fire in a distance. Use it and then use a heavy and you'll blow up that bomb for a bigger, more effective, effect. This works in many builds though, and actually a lot of, say, ice builds or magic builds like to use this weapon because it is an intelligence weapon. It is very effective in both sides of the content then, especially in boss fights where you have them standing in the fire, just walking in it, and then and spamming the explosion over and over, or in PvP, where you're playing the mind games of which attack will come out on this Ash, and working in unison with other things, say in power stance, using spells, creating great threat as a great tool in your tool belt. But on its own, I think it's just the Ash of War that seems to have real output, whereas you're not really relying on the basics of the weapon all that much. It's not that strong there. So B grade again, fair to me. Lastly, for B grade though, we have Health and Steeple, which some people might think should be a bit higher rated, but let me explain. It is a great sword that is an also intelligence weapon. When you use the Ash of War, you will light the weapon on fire with Black Flame. Black Flame deals damage over time, and percent damage over time at that. So really good against bosses with big health pools, which is, you know, most of them. There's two parts to the attack actually. You buff up and it deals a bit of damage as you buff up, and then you've got a regular greatsword moveset with this buffed up weapon. This works great in power stance with another one, or say with a Darkmoon greatsword, where you can swap between them and get the benefits of that black fire in a consistent way. In fact, there's loads of ways to work this weapon into a build, but much like the Death's Poker, I see it as a part of a build with some utility rather than the weapon itself on its own being really strong. It's just that black fire and the benefit of that that's nice, and it finds a great place in a build around that concept. So for that reason, again, B tier. Now we move up to the A tier, where we have most of the weapons on this list, starting with Odovis's Greatsword, which was greatly buffed in 1.07, making it an incredibly powerful and effective and fun weapon at that, all tied to its Ash of War. In 1.07, they made it have better attack power, so it hits harder. They give it much better motion speed, so it comes out way quicker, as well as it being a really cool Ash of War. And then it's got more poise damage, so you can stagger enemies really well with it. They also gave it poise protection during the cast, so a form of hyper armor, so you can trade with it, and it's got better recovery, so it can be used in combination with other attacks, or just get you out of it so you don't get hit maybe if you missed it. The AoE isn't a massive range, but it's noticeable, and using it in PvP is extremely fun. As a incredibly effective sudden trading tool, I've loved this weapon, whereas in PvE, you can just blindly spam the Ash of War. It comes out so quick, does great damage, especially against those weak to Holy, obviously, and it's an Ash of War, so you will cause staggers leading to criticals or other combinations. This weapon on its own can be entirely relied upon thanks to that Ash of War, and that's what makes it an A tier pick. It's satisfying as hell to use though. I remember getting this thing in the network test before the game actually released, and it was really strong there, but in full release, just nowhere near as good. Maybe they've walked back the adjustments they made, and it's a lot more viable and a great weapon in general now. Another great weapon that's in multiple buffs is Morgoth's Cursed Sword. Buffed back in 1.06 and before, it has a much faster and more effective Ash of War combo now. Now the double pop aspect is something that's great because it will protect you in PvP where someone is trying to trade with you, maybe you miss the actual strike and then the pop goes off, it'll stagger them, then you can do the follow-up combo and hit them actually then. That can be great. The Cursed Blood aspect will deal both bleed and fire damage, which is going to be incredible throughout all of the game, most of the game anyway, in PvE. And as a long curved greatsword, it has really good range on the basic moveset. One of the best, in fact. The only real downsides of this weapon is comparing it to other bleed weapons, or even the other Cursed Blood weapons at that. Compared to those, its output, its DPS potential is a lot lower. But as a greatsword, it's really the only option for that. It stands up as one of the best due to the aspect of bleed, fire, and effective Ash combo spam. But at the same time, it's also not exactly broken OP like some of the S tier options will be and can be. It's just a really well done, well performing greatsword. Just like our next weapon, the Magma Worm Scale Sword, which is kind of like a ultra curved greatsword and yet is officially a curved greatsword. This is a beast of a weapon for its fire-based damage and trade-winning ability for a weapon that is, again, technically a curved greatsword. I treat it like I would a colossal weapon, though. It's lighter compared to those and super effective because of that. It's unique heavy and also Ash of War style of attacks are both sort of guillotine-style slam downs, incredible for trading whichever one you use. The Ash was specifically buffed to have better poise damage, though, which allows it to secure its ability to trade in PvP, where it will hit like an absolute truck. And if you're using the Ash to do so, you'll leave lava everywhere, dealing tick damage over time, and obviously that's really effective against enemies weak to fire. I find it mega effective in that case in PvE when you're dealing with weak to fire enemies, and that is ultimately a lot of the enemies in Elden Ring, that's for sure. Also, as a longer weapon, it's also got good range. I really like this weapon, and I consider it a underrated, underplayed pick. I rarely see it when I play PvP, but I've always really enjoyed this weapon, and A tier is again right for it. Next up, we might have one that's controversial because some people are going to say, no, that's an S tier pick. It's A tier for Bloodhound's Fang. It's that classic weapon that many people just used in their first playthrough for a good chunk, or as many people I know, the whole way. It's straight out of the box, high damage and super effective even if you're just meeting the bare minimum stats to use it. It's also a very buffable weapon because it can take any buff using an incantation, sorcery, or just like a grease and really get the DPS going on this thing. And it's also got a very interesting Ash of War. We've got evasive movement and a dash in and smash them, which is fun and effective, but can be awkward to use at first, especially in PvP where it's obviously very predictable. As soon as someone jumps back with it, you're like, oh, they've done the Ash of War, can't get hit by the heavy follow-up, and you avoid that. And then it's also very punishable when they've done that animation and you're close enough to hit them. It is effective to begin with, but it doesn't scale amazingly compared to other weapons when you're getting lots more stats on it. It just works really well in the early to mid game. And PvP wise, it can really work well, but it requires a bit of luck really to get the Ash off. So that's why I keep it down below an S tier, but A tier feels very fair. Another weapon some people might consider an S tier, at least in the context, is the Golden Order Greatsword, which I put at an A. In previous patches, they made the Ash of War, which is really cool, much faster, and that made it way more effective and much more fun to use, especially against those weak to Holy, where it absolutely destroys. You use the Ash of War and do a Holy explosion around you, then do a sort of arcing swipe, which sends an arc at range, and it also can pierce as well. In PvP, that has really high sort of knockdown potential. I just would knock people down with this constantly, really funny. And it works really well in the arena or team battles where you're off screen and can send out that long range arc after the wind up, which is where it's kind of awkward. Now in duels, ever landing that Ash is going to be unlikely. You can get the pop explosion, which does a lot less damage, but getting the actual arc, the thing you want to hit, is so obvious that they're just probably going to roll it. In PvE, you can absolutely rely on the Ash of War spamming it, but it has a bit of a wind up, so bosses can interrupt you before you can get it off. So the potential is really high there, especially when you're dealing with weak to Holy enemies. And where it works incredibly well. So yeah, A tier for me. Last in A tier then is the Sacred Relic Sword, which is technically better this patch. We all know this one, it's the rune farming machine, and despite how fun and effective it is to use the Ash of War in open world content, it obviously has some downsides. There's the slower nature of the Ash, so it covers a huge area and dealing good damage, but is really predictable because of that. In PvP duels, it's unlikely you're ever going to land this on an opponent because they hear it, they see it coming, they got lots of time, they just roll it. But in the new arenas of 1.08, you have free-for-all, you have team fights, you can use this off screen and clear an entire half of the arena, smashing multiple foes with it, dealing lots of damage. It's very fun there. Anywhere you can make this weapon work, it'll do great, and it has good scaling on the basic attacks too. There's just sections of the game where it also won't work great. So A again makes sense for me because it's so good where it is good, that's the thing. Alright, we find ourselves at the S tier. Let's start with the Mariah's Executioner Sword, which is a DPS god. That corkscrew Ash of War is ridiculous, and it was made faster with better recovery, and you can roll out of it should things go wrong. That alone has made this weapon insane, where it was already really good, just a bit awkward because you were held in that Ash. Now the corkscrew is so much more reliable and safer to use, you can use it to absolutely steamroll bosses, chopping through them at lightning speed thanks to successive damage builds. Various talismans and even wondrous physics mean the AI you can get by skyrocketing using one Ash of War and then following it up with another, you'll just kill most bosses like that, which is incredibly satisfying and a very fun weapon to use. The downside of this weapon is just that, yeah, compared to the boss that uses it, you have much less control. You have the one sort of corkscrew attack. It'd be so much cooler if we could do like AoE spins or maybe like activate it. Whatever the case, that corkscrew is one of the highest DPS things you can do in the entire game, and because of the improvements to recovery and the control of this weapon, it works really well in PvP, where you can absolutely destroy people with this thing. It's undeniably an S tier pick because of its potential and output. Much like the Dark Moon Greatsword, which again, I think is another great weapon that deserves to be here. I'm very happy to see, you know, our Moonlight great as a good weapon in Elden Ring. It's not amazing as a Greatsword on its own, but when you buff it up, it becomes great. It's got that ice build-up, which is obviously going to be useful, but we mostly care about the heavy attack, where you're sending out an arc really quickly, really effectively, with high poise damage and ridiculously high damage at that. There are many ways to make a charged heavy attack deal more damage, and because it's a ranged attack, it's very consistent and easy to land in both PvE and PvP. We can absolutely play mind games in PvP, doing a quick charge, doing a full charge, doing a basic attack into a combo charge. There's many ways to make it work, and the pressure that this weapon creates is just massive. It's one of the hardest hitting range options you have in one single blow because of the way we can make those builds work, and it's insanely effective in so many builds and in general in PvP. Again, another one I feel is undeniably S tier and one of the best weapons in the game. But we should probably just Get it out of the way, I've said this weapon so many times. The Blasphemous Blade, S tier, obviously, lifesteal on damage, lifesteal on kill, a hilariously effective Ash of War that's really long range and wide, which is even better this patch in the arena and free-for-all, and also team fights, where you can off-screen spam the Ash of War, where it deals ridiculous damage, heals you, knocks people down. It's just stupid. You can just entirely rely on the Ash of War with this weapon, but baseline it's still a physical and fire weapon, which is great with a Greatsword moveset, works great in combination with many other Greatswords and power stands, like the list we've shown, maybe the Golden Order Greatsword, maybe the Sword of Milos. This thing's just insane, man. It always has been, from the beginning, and it's just somehow got better over various patches. It's probably the best weapon in the game overall, and isn't it interesting to see that 3 Greatswords are arguably some of the best weapons in the entire game. So here is our overall tier list, our Greatswords that I feel are the best ones, and now I've reorganized them so the strongest in each tier is on the left and the weakest is on the right, although again that's splitting hairs, there isn't much difference between it. Let me know what you think though, and is there any other Greatswords that I should have included on this list? It's been quite fun to take a look at a category of weapon finally, and there's a lot we can look at. For now though, I've been Hollow, you've been you, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.